Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. This time into a car that might just surprise you, the Fiat Coupé.
A unique choice, for sure.
And this one's especially for the listeners of Vintage Car Chronicles on Spotify.
Buckle up, because this car's story, well, it starts not with roaring engines, but with a failed luxury convertible.
Oh, now that's not how I expected this to start, that's for sure.
Imagine this. Pininfarina, the renowned Italian design house, they had a factory just sitting empty
An empty factory.
after the Cadillac Alante,
Idolante.
a car they actually designed and built.
Oh wow,
It just didn't quite take off as expected.
a failed convertible, huh?
Mhm.
What happened next?
Well, naturally, they were pretty eager to get a new project rolling.
I can imagine so.
So they turned to Fiat. Right, but it wasn't as simple as just, hey, let's build a car.
I bet it wasn't.
Fiat's own internal design team, Center Style.
They wanted in on this too.
Oh, absolutely. They wanted in on the action.
So what happened?
Well, it became a head-to-head design competition. Can you imagine?
Oh wow, a design duel.
It gets even more interesting.
Lay it on me?
Leading the Fiat team was a young Chris Bangle.
No way, the Chris Bangle.
The very same, the one who later shook things up at BMW.
Wow, that is interesting. That's some serious design pedigree.
It really is, and it makes you wonder, what was it about his design that ultimately won over the Fiat executives?
Especially going up against such a design powerhouse like Pininfarina.
It was bold, almost audacious.
Bold, how
A
so?
real departure from those, elegant and more traditional designs Pininfarina was known for.
Okay, so something totally different.
Think a low-slung, aggressive front end. Some even called it mini Ferrari.
Whoa, Mini Ferrari, they were really going for it.
Oh, they were dramatically slashed wheel arches. And wait for it,
I'm on the edge of my seat.
round taillights.
Round taillights, interesting choice.
A design that wasn't afraid to make a statement, that's for sure.
So this Fiat Coupé, a car born out of an unexpected partnership, sporting a design that was, well, let's just say it sparked some debate.
It definitely turned heads.
It sounds like a car that really made people take notice, one way or another. But what else makes it so interesting? What else is there to this story?
Well, the design was just the beginning.
There's more.
Oh, there's so much more to uncover. The Fiat Coupé had more to offer than just its looks.
Like what?
Well, it actually borrowed design cues from Fiat's rich sports car heritage. Little touches that you might not notice at first glance.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, for instance, that distinctive cast alloy petrol cap.
A petrol cap.
Yep, a feature you'd usually find on classic sports cars.
So it had a bit of a vintage vibe.
It did. It was like a nod to the past. And remember that mini Ferrari comment?
How could I forget?
Well, that wasn't just about the boldness.
There was more to it.
Take a closer look at the front snout, and you'll see echoes of the iconic Fiat Dino from the 60s.
I see those design references, they really add another dimension to the car.
They do. They give it a sense of history, a connection to something bigger.
But we're talking about a Fiat, not a Ferrari. So did the performance live up to those sporty looks? Did it back up all that style?
Absolutely. This is where Fiat's engineering really shines.
I'm ready for the details. Tell me everything.
They took their Tipo platform, known
How?
for its solid handling, they adapted it,
Adapted it how?
tuned it for a sportier driving experience.
Okay, but the real question is, what about the engine? That's the heart of any sports car.
Ah, yes, the engine. Well, think back to the legendary Lancia Delta Integrale.
Now you're talking the Delta Integrale, a true icon.
They actually sourced the initial engine from there.
No way, really.
A powerful 2.0-liter four-cylinder,
Okay, I'm listening.
and you could get it in two flavors, if you will.
Two flavors. I like where this is going.
A naturally aspirated version, a bit more relaxed.
How much horsepower are we talking?
A respectable 142 horsepower.
That's not bad at all. And what about the other flavor?
Well, for the thrill seekers, a turbocharged version,
Oh, here we go.
pumping out a hefty 195 horsepower.
Now that's what I'm talking about. A turbocharged 90s coupe.
Yeah,
That sounds like a recipe for some serious fun.
it was.
Did they stick with that engine throughout the car's production?
Actually, no, they didn't, and this is where things get even more interesting.
I knew there had to be a twist.
Hold on to your hats, because in 1996, they introduced a brand new engine to the lineup.
A brand new engine. Tell me more.
A 5-cylinder unit sourced from their Bravo and Brava models.
Bravo and Brava. Now, those weren't exactly known for their performance.
True, but this engine wasn't just a minor upgrade, it was a game changer.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What made it so special?
Power was definitely part of the equation, but there was more to it than that.
Mall ears.
This engine, it had character, a real personality.
A personality. How can an engine have a personality?
We'll know it when you hear it. It delivered its power smoothly.
Okay.
And it had this unique sound, almost like a growl, but with a European flair.
A European growl. I'm starting to understand.
They offered it in both naturally aspirated and turbocharged forms, just like the previous engine.
Okay, so what kind of power were we talking about here?
The naturally aspirated version started with a respectable 147 horsepower,
Not bad.
and they actually later bumped it up to 154.
Okay, that's pretty decent, but I have a feeling the turbocharged version was something else.
You read my mind. The turbocharged 5-cylinder was the crown jewel of the lineup.
Lay it on me. How much power are we talking?
A staggering 220 horsepower.
220 horsepower.
It made the Fiat Coupé the fastest production Fiat ever made at that time.
Whoa, 220 horsepower in a lightweight coupe. We're talking serious performance here. What were the numbers like? How quick was this thing?
Imagine this, 0 to 60 miles per hour in a blistering 6.5 seconds.
6.5 seconds. That's supercar territory.
It is.
And this was a Fiat.
It was. And there's one more detail that really elevates this car.
I'm listening. Tell me everything.
One that often gets overlooked. That cast alloy petrol cap.
The petrol cap. You're really into this petrol cap.
It's a small touch, but it's a nod to classic sports cars and Fiat's own sporting heritage, you know?
I see what you mean. It's those little details that add layers to a car's personality.
Absolutely.
But with all this power going through the front wheels, I have to ask, was torque steer an issue?
That's a great question. And you're right, front-wheel drive cars with powerful engines can sometimes struggle with torque steer.
So what did Fiat do about it?
Well, their engineers, they knew what they were doing.
So they were prepared for this?
They equipped the coupe with a sophisticated suspension system.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they even included a limited slip differential in some models.
A limited slip differential, so they really engineered this car to handle its power.
They did. They wanted to make sure it was controllable and fun to drive.
That's impressive. But I can't help but wonder, did they make any special editions of this already unique car?
They did. In 1998, they released a limited edition.
A limited edition.
Later renamed the Turbo Plus.
Turbo Plus. Okay, what was special about it?
It took everything up a notch.
Up a notch how?
An even more aggressive body kit.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Titanium gray wheels, red brake calipers, just for that extra sporty touch.
Nice, nice. What about the interior?
Inside, Recaro seats for added support.
Okay, yeah.
And, wait for it, a push-button start.
Whoa, a push-button start in 1998? That's pretty cool.
It was a pretty high-tech feature for that era.
Sounds like they saved the best for last with that limited edition.
They did. It was a fitting send-off for a truly special car.
So this Fiat Coupé, it had a fascinating backstory, a controversial yet captivating design, and performance that punched way above its weight. But what happened next? Did it sell well?
Well, like all good things, its production run had to come to an end.
When did that happen?
It ended in 2000, but even though its time in the spotlight was relatively short, it left a lasting impact.
It did.
It was a bold statement in a market full of cookie-cutter designs.
So it really stood out.
It proved that Fiat could create exciting and affordable sports cars.
And I bet it turned some heads along the way.
It definitely did, that's for sure.
But we've been talking a lot about the exterior of this car. And that's understandable because it's pretty striking. But what about the interior? Pininfarina was involved, right?
They were, and you might be surprised to learn that they took a very different approach compared to that bold exterior.
Different how?
Instead of matching that, futuristic vibe, they went for a more retro-inspired cabin.
Retro-inspired. That's an interesting contrast.
It is. Picture this. A body-colored metal strip running across the dashboard.
Oh, that's stylish.
Then you've got these classic circular dials for the instruments.
Very traditional.
Very Italian. And then you even had the option for luxurious leather seats.
Okay, so you've got this futuristic exterior and then a classic, almost nostalgic interior. Did those two styles clash, or did they somehow work together?
Believe it or not, they worked.
They did.
The contrast created this really interesting tension, almost like the car is saying, I'm modern and classic, rebellious and refined.
That's a great way to put it. This car was a rebel with a refined heart. But we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into the Fiat Coupé.
We have, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Exactly. There's so much more to explore, and when we come back in part 2, We'll delve even deeper into those controversial design elements.
We'll analyze what made those features so distinctive and why they spark such passionate debate.
What were the features people loved? What were the features people hated?
We'll dissect it all and see what made this car such a head-turner, for better or for worse.
So join us next time as we continue our deep dive into the Fiat Coupé, a car that dared to be different and left its mark on automotive history.
It's a story you won't want to miss. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Fiat Coupé. We spent the first part talking about its origin story, that unexpected partnership, and a design that, well,
Let's just say it caused quite a stir.
it did. It really did. So now I think it's time to put those controversial design elements under the microscope.
A closer look. I like it. So we talked about those mini Ferrari comparisons, the Fiat dyno inspiration. What were some of the other standout features that made this car,
Distinctive.
maybe a little divisive?
Well, I think one of the first things that grabs your attention is the car's low-slung profile.
Yeah, it's got that wedge shape,
It's almost like it's cutting through the air, even when it's standing still.
a real sense of motion.
Exactly. Very dynamic.
What about the front end? That's where a lot of the debate seemed to focus, right?
The front end. Oh, yeah, that's where Bangle's bold vision really takes center stage.
Those headlights, they were something else.
Those headlights, they're unlike anything you'd typically see on a car. Those curvaceous, almost bulbous shapes.
These integrated into the hood.
The hood itself swoops down to form the front fenders. It's a very unconventional design.
It is. You either love them or...
You have a strong opinion about them, that's for sure.
I know I do, but you know what else I find interesting? Those slashes above the wheel arches.
Ah, yes, the infamous eyelash slashes. Another signature Bangle touch.
They add a real sense of drama, don't they?
They do. It's almost as if the car is winking at you. A little bit of playfulness?
In an otherwise very serious design.
Exactly.
I like that analogy, a playful wink. It's like the car has a personality.
It does, a sense of humor.
But let's move to the back of the car. We touched on those round taillights before. What was the thinking behind that design choice? Why round?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, those round taillights were
Yeah.
a deliberate reference to Ferrari, that mini Ferrari nickname, the whole rear end, actually.
So short deck, those distinctive lights.
It evokes the feeling of a classic Italian sports car.
It really does. You can definitely see the resemblance.
Athleticism.
A hint of aggression.
Exactly.
But let's step inside for a moment. We talked about how Pininfarina took a more retro approach with the interior. Can you paint a picture for our listeners? What did that look like in practice?
So you open the door and you're greeted by this sweep of body-colored metal running across the dashboard.
Very stylish.
Very stylish. Then your eyes are drawn to the classic circular dials for the instruments.
Very traditional.
Very Italian.
It's almost like stepping back in time.
It is. You have this futuristic exterior and then a classic, almost nostalgic interior.
Did those two styles clash? Or did they somehow complement each other?
You know what? I think they actually work together quite well.
They did.
That contrast between the exterior and interior, it creates this really interesting tension.
Like the car is saying.
I can be both modern and classic, rebellious and refined.
That's a great way to put it, a car that embraces contradictions. But beyond the styling, were there any other details that made the coupe special?
Absolutely. One detail that often gets overlooked is that cast alloy petrol cap.
The petrol cap again?
I know, but it's a nod to both classic sports cars and Fiat's own rich sporting heritage.
It's those little touches that add authenticity.
Exactly, especially for a car that was trying to recapture that heritage while also pushing boundaries.
I agree. It's those details that make a car memorable, that give it character.
Yeah. But we've been talking a lot about what people liked, or at least found interesting about the coupe's design. What about the criticisms? What did people not like?
Yeah, it wasn't universally loved, was it?
It wasn't. The main criticism was that the design was just too unconventional.
Too over the top.
Some people found the front end, with those unusual headlights, to be awkward.
Not attractive.
Others weren't fans of the eyelash slashes above the wheel arches. They thought they were unnecessary, a bit fussy.
So it was a love it or hate it kind of design.
Which, honestly, isn't a bad thing for a car that's trying to stand out.
A car that provokes strong reactions, whether positive or negative, it's a car that has made an impact.
Exactly. And the Fiat Coupé, it definitely made an impact.
It's a car that people remember, and in a world where so many cars blend into the background.
Being memorable is a valuable quality.
It is, but, as we've been discussing the coupe's design, I've been thinking about something. We've talked about how Bangle's design was bold and unconventional, but it also drew inspiration from Fiat's past, from cars like the Dino. Do you think the coupe's design would have been as successful
Or even as accepted?
if it hadn't had that connection to Fiat's heritage?
That's a really insightful question, and it's hard to say for sure, but I think that connection to the past was crucial.
It gave it a sense of legitimacy.
A sense of belonging. It wasn't just some random futuristic shape.
It was a Fiat sports car, part of a lineage.
That stretched back decades.
It had a story to tell, a connection to something bigger than itself.
Exactly.
But as much as we could talk about the design all day, it's time to move on to what was under the hood. Let's talk engines.
The heart of the Fiat Coupé.
We talked briefly about the Lancia Delta Integrale-derived engine, but I'm ready for more details. Give us the full scoop. We've talked about its unique origins, that head-turning design, but now,
It's time to talk about what really made this car a performer.
let's get into those engines.
The heart of the Fiat Coupé.
We talked about that engine borrowed from the legendary Lancia Delta Integrale.
Oh, yeah, a true icon.
Remind us about that beast,
A 2.0-liter four-cylinder engine.
known for its power.
And its responsiveness.
It came in two versions, right?
That's right. You had your naturally aspirated version, a smooth and comfortable 142 horsepower.
Okay, not bad. And the other version.
Then you had the turbocharged version, unleashing a thrilling 195 horsepower.
Okay, now we're talking.
A turbocharged 90s coupe.
Sounds like an absolute blast to drive.
It was a real pocket rocket.
Did Fiat stick with that engine throughout the coupe's production run?
Actually, no, they didn't. Things get even more interesting in 1996.
I knew there had to be another twist in this story.
They introduced a five-cylinder engine.
Five-cylinder, where did that come from?
It was actually borrowed from their Bravo and Brava models.
The Bravo and Brava, those weren't exactly known for their performance.
You're right, they weren't. But this engine, it was a game changer.
Okay, I'm listening. What made this five-cylinder so special?
Well, aside from the fact that it had this unique and distinctive sound,
A unique sound, what do you mean?
some might even call it a growl, it had this fantastic blend of power and refinement.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
And just like the previous engine,
It came in both naturally aspirated.
and turbocharged forms.
Okay, let's break it down. What about the naturally aspirated version?
The naturally aspirated version initially produced 147 horsepower,
Not bad at all.
and later they actually bumped it up to 154.
Okay, a decent amount of power, but I'm guessing the turbocharged version was the real showstopper?
You bet it was. That turbocharged five-cylinder was an absolute powerhouse.
How much horsepower are we talking here?
An impressive 220 horsepower.
220 horsepower? That's a lot of power for a Fiat.
It transformed the Fiat Coupé into a true performance machine.
It made it the fastest production Fiat ever produced at the time.
It did.
220 horsepower, that's impressive, but how did that translate to on-the-road performance?
Hold on tight, because this version of the Fiat Coupé could go from 0 to 60 mile per hour in a breathtaking 6.5 seconds.
6.5 seconds, that's incredible.
That's quicker than some sports cars even today.
And this was a Fiat from the 90s.
I know, it's amazing, right?
It is. I can see why this is considered the holy grail for Fiat Coupe enthusiasts, but with all that power going through the front wheels,
I know what you're going to ask.
was torque steer an issue?
It's a valid concern. You know, putting that much power through the front wheels can lead to torque steer.
Making the car difficult to handle.
But Fiat's engineers, they were clever. They anticipated this issue.
So they were one step ahead.
They addressed it with some clever engineering. They equipped the coupe with a sophisticated suspension system.
Okay, makes sense.
And some versions even had a limited slip differential.
Which helped to minimize torque steer.
And ensure the car remained controllable, even under hard acceleration.
They really put some thought into making sure this car could handle all that power.
They did. They wanted to make sure it was a joy to drive.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Talk about the Fiat Coupe's legacy. What kind of impact did this car have on the automotive world?
Well, it really challenged people's perceptions of what a Fiat could be.
Back then, Fiat was known for producing reliable, affordable cars, often practical.
But not really seen as a maker of exciting sports cars.
So this car really changed that.
It did. It was a statement.
It said, hey, we can build thrilling sports cars too.
Fiat was back in the game.
Ready to compete with the best.
Absolutely. But that begs the question, was it a commercial success?
Did it actually sell well?
It was a moderate success, especially in its home market of Italy, Over its 7-year production run, a little over 72,000 units were sold.
Okay, so not a huge number.
But respectable, you have to remember, it was a bit of a niche product.
So why didn't it sell even more? Was it just that polarizing design?
The design probably played a role, but there were other factors at play.
Like what?
Well, for one, it was a front-wheel drive car,
And some enthusiasts,
preferred rear-wheel drive.
especially for a true sports car.
Exactly. And secondly, Fiat was still working to rebuild its reputation in certain markets
After some quality control issues.
back in the 80s.
So it faced some headwinds, but it still managed to carve out a place for itself.
It did. And today, the Fiat Coupé is considered a cult classic.
Appreciated for its unique design
Spirited performance.
and relatively affordable price tag.
It's a car that stands out from the crowd. That's what makes it so appealing.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most memorable cars are the ones that dare to be different. Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about the Fiat Coupé, from its unexpected beginnings to its lasting legacy.
We've gone from a failed Cadillac to a Fiat triumph.
It's a car that challenged conventions and made a statement, both in terms of design and performance. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Fiat Coupé. It's been a fascinating journey through automotive history.
And we hope you've enjoyed learning about this unique and often overlooked gem.
And for all our vintage car enthusiasts listening, don't forget to tune in to Vintage Car Chronicles on Spotify, with new episodes released daily for more intriguing stories from the world of automobiles.